Boulder, Colorado, 5:52 in the morning, December 26, 1996. A 911 call comes in from one of the wealthiest homes in town. A mother, her voice breaking apart, reports that her 6-year-old daughter is missing. On the breakfast table sits a ransom note nearly 3 pages long, longer than almost any ransom note veteran investigators had ever seen in their careers. 8 hours later, the girl's own father will walk down into his basement and carry up something that will make sure no one in that family ever lives a normal life again. But there is one figure in this story who, for almost 30 years, has almost never gotten to tell his side in full. A 9-year-old boy in that same house, that same night. His name is Burke Ramsey. Today, we're going through 10 things you may not know about Burke Ramsey, pulled from police files, audio recordings, investigative books, and his own words. Before we start, if this channel is helping you see this case more clearly, hit like, subscribe to Tell Index, and share this with someone else following the JonBenét Ramsey case. It's what lets us keep making deeper investigative videos like this one. Burke's story doesn't start with an accusation. It starts with a house and a kid almost nobody paid attention to. Before he was a suspect in the eyes of millions of viewers, Burke Ramsey was just a 9-year-old boy. Quiet, tech-obsessed, living in the shadow of a little sister, quickly becoming a fixture of Colorado's child pageant circuit. Nobody paid him much attention until investigators started turning over every page of this family's life and realized the boy had been in the house that night, just steps from JonBenét's bedroom. That's the moment Burke Ramsey's story split off from his sister's and became its own investigation, one that would stretch on for nearly 3 decades. That separate investigation begins with Burke's very first alibi, one that came straight from his own parents and nearly got overturned by a tape almost 20 years later. In the earliest hours of the investigation, John and Patsy Ramsey told police the same thing. Burke slept through the night, unaware anything was happening until police walked through the door. But there was a detail sitting quietly in the archive for almost 20 years, until the 911 dispatcher who took that call, Kimberly Archuleta, sat down in front of Dateline NBC cameras in 2016 and described what she couldn't forget. After Patsy seemed to hang up, the line stayed open, and she heard voices. The producers of CBS's The Case of JonBenét Ramsey hired an audio engineer to enhance that recording. Former FBI profiler Jim Clemente and behavioral analyst Laura Richards reached a conclusion that stopped the country in its tracks. 3 voices. John apparently saying, "We're not speaking to you." Patsy, maybe, "What did you do?" And a child's voice. They believed it was Burke, asking, "What did you find?" If true, it shattered the family's original account entirely. But here's where a documentary has to stop and be fair to the record. Both the FBI and the U.S. Secret Service reviewed this same tape back in 1997 and found nothing to confirm a third voice. In 2003, NBC's own independent audio team reached the same conclusion. Nothing clear enough to say for certain. If the voice on the tape is disputed because no one can agree on what they're hearing, the next detail comes from something far less ambiguous. A documented history of physical conflict between the 2 siblings. Roll the clock back roughly a year and a half before that fatal night. According to an old family friend cited by CBS Real Crime and multiple case compilations, there was an incident. Burke, in a fit of anger, swung a metal golf club and struck JonBenét in the face, leaving a scar that lasted for some time. The family always called it a childhood accident. But for behavioral analysts later, people like Jim Clemente, that detail became one small piece of a larger picture. Evidence that physical conflict, however impulsive, had happened between these 2 siblings before. A golf club is history. But on the night of December 25th, something far smaller, a bowl of fruit, would become one of the most argued over clues in the entire case. Pathologist Dr. John Meyer, performing the autopsy, found undigested pineapple-like fragments in JonBenét's stomach. That meant she had eaten pineapple somewhere between 1 and 2 hours before she died. And on the Ramseys' breakfast table, police found exactly that. A bowl of milk-soaked pineapple, a spoon still inside. Fingerprint testing on the bowl and spoon, according to case records compiled by journalist Paula Woodward and others, turned up one print from Patsy and one from Burke. Patsy always maintained she never gave JonBenét pineapple that night and didn't know who had set the bowl on the table. If that's true, who was eating pineapple with JonBenét in the middle of the night? But to be fair, not every source agrees. Forensic psychiatrist Steve Pitt, who worked directly on the investigation, told People magazine the prints he understood to be on the bowl and cup belonged to Patsy. A fingerprint only proves a hand touched something at some point. It doesn't tell you when. If the pineapple bowl raises the question of who was awake that night, JonBenét's own body raised a different one, about the weapon that left marks across her back. On JonBenét's back and cheek were small, red, evenly spaced marks, roughly 3.5 centimeters apart. Detective Lou Smith, who believed firmly in the Ramseys' innocence, spent years of his career trying to prove they came from a stun gun. He and forensic pathologist Dr. Michael Doberson even tested the theory on pigskin. But on the other side, former investigator James Kolar, who had access to over 60,000 pages of case material during his time with the Boulder County DA's office, offered a completely different theory in his 2012 book Foreign Faction. He argued the marks matched the spacing of the metal prongs on a toy train track, the exact same set sitting in the Ramseys' basement, where Burke often played. Even Air Taser representative Stephen Tuttle, when asked directly about the stun gun theory, admitted it defies the logic of what the weapon does. That train set belonged to Burke, and the room that housed it will come back into this story. But first, the morning after, the morning where Burke's reaction became the center of 2 decades of argument. 20 years later, Dr. Phil McGraw sat across from an adult Burke Ramsey and asked the question several investigators had quietly asked for years. Why, on the morning the family realized JonBenét was missing, did the 9-year-old boy, according to 1997 interview notes, apparently never ask about his sister's welfare? It's the kind of detail that haunts behavioral analysts. A normal child watching police fill the house and his mother break down crying would ask. Burke, according to that account, didn't. But Burke himself, on camera in 2016, told a different version. Well, it was pretty much, "Hey, we can't find your sister. What do you think happened?" And I was like, well, she's probably just hiding somewhere. Have you guys looked around the house? 2 accounts. One from a 1997 interview file. One from the man himself, 19 years later. No continuous footage exists from that morning to settle which one is right. That unsettling stillness wasn't the only time Burke's expression made viewers uneasy. There's another image, one that shows up not once, but twice, nearly a generation apart.
What about Christmas Eve? When you were going up there, did you guys have a snack before you went to bed that night?
I forget.
What was JonBenét's favorite snack?
I don't think she had a snack. Anytime before bed.
Okay. Would she ever like a particular thing to eat during the day, for a snack?
Just whatever Mom had laid out. Cause she always had laid out a snack for after school.
Okay.
So whatever she had ready, I just eat.
And what would a typical snack be?
Pudding or just like leftover pizza or something.
So would there ever be, it sounds like your mom was pretty nutritional,
She wasn't that curious.
Wasn't she?
Yeah.
Some some moms cut up apples.
Yeah.
What else would she do fruit-wise?
That's all I know. Pineapple.
Pineapple.
Yeah.
You mentioned that once before. Is that kind of a favorite
Yeah.
of the family?
It's really, like, really favorite thing.
Is that probably the most favorite?
Apples or pineapple, probably the same.
Did you ever have any keys that maybe if you got locked out, you could get somewhere? You know, some people keep keys kind of hidden under something, or, you know, out in the yard, or a secret hiding place that they can put a key, you know, if they get locked out.
I don't remember. I mean, one time we did get locked out, and there are, I mean, this is a drawing basement, but there are 2 windows in the basement.
It's right here.
Yeah, 2 windows, and my dad had to break the windows and then go around and unlock the door. Cause, I mean, when the doors are locked, you can open them from the inside, but not the outside. So,
Are you talking about basement windows?
yeah, he broke the basement windows, went through there, came up around.
Then let you in.
Yeah, then I think it was the front door and went in.
Were you with him when that happened? When he had to get in that way?
Yeah, I was with him, but I didn't actually go in.
No,
I
this,
just waited.
okay. You waited where?
I don't know where exactly, but
Okay.
it was either the front door or the store.
Okay, so he had to let you in that way.
Yeah.
In the 1998 interrogation tape, an 11-year-old boy occasionally smiles when asked about his sister's death. 18 years later, in Dr. Phil's chair, a 29-year-old man still carries that same expression, surfacing at exactly the moments where, instinctively, an audience feels it shouldn't. Some viewers, some commentators, have gone as far as to speculate about the autism spectrum. That has never been publicly confirmed by Burke, his family, or any named physician. Psychologically, trauma specialists point out that mismatched affect can be a defense mechanism against overwhelming anxiety, and it isn't rare in children or adults who lived through childhood trauma. It's unsettling to watch, but on its own, it isn't evidence of a crime. If the smile was something Burke couldn't control, the next detail is something he volunteered himself, and it places him exactly where and exactly when anyone following this case would want to know. The object believed capable of causing JonBenét's fatal skull fracture was a heavy black Maglite flashlight, sitting on the kitchen counter, wiped clean of fingerprints, according to the evidence list compiled from Boulder police files. Nobody wipes their own prints off an innocent object. And here the story takes an unexpected turn, not from investigator speculation, but from Burke's own words. In the 2016 interview, he admitted that after everyone had gone to sleep that night, he got out of bed to assemble a toy. When Dr. Phil asked whether he'd used the flashlight to avoid being seen, Burke answered, "I don't remember. I just remember being downstairs with this toy." An admission, not an accusation. But it places Burke, in his own words, on the lower level of the house, in the middle of the night, in the exact area where the flashlight, and possibly the murder weapon, were sitting. That same lower level of the house held one more piece of evidence. One talked about far less than the flashlight, but found closer to JonBenét's body than almost anything else on this list. In the basement laundry area, not far from the wine cellar where JonBenét's body was found, police recovered a red pocket knife. According to an evidence list compiled by case researchers from police files, some sources cite former family housekeeper Linda Hoffman Pugh saying the knife belonged to Burke, and that she had confiscated it herself, hiding it upstairs out of concern. At the same time, while Patsy consistently described her son as quiet and gentle, former investigator James Kolar and accounts attributed to a family housekeeper paint a different picture: outbursts of temper, particularly when JonBenét took his things or their parents' attention. These are details that deserve careful handling. The knife's exact ownership has never been confirmed in any published official forensic report, and temper outbursts in a 7 or 8-year-old fighting over toys or parental attention are developmentally ordinary, not, on their own, evidence of anything more. The knife, the flashlight, the model train set, all traced back to the same basement. And it's in that same basement, right under a broken window, that the final detail sits, perhaps the most misunderstood one on this entire list. In the basement train room, where Burke spent hours playing with his model railroad, police found a broken window and directly beneath it, a Samsonite suitcase pushed flush against the wall, as if placed there as a step. John Ramsey said he'd noticed the window cracked open that morning and closed it, but didn't mention it to anyone at the time. In Foreign Faction, James Kolar zeroes in on this detail, because John only disclosed it months later during an April 1997 police interview. Inside the suitcase, according to court filings and the public evidence list, were a duvet, a pillow sham, and a Dr. Seuss book. Lab analysis found that fibers from the duvet and sham matched fibers found on the shirt JonBenét was wearing when she was discovered in the wine cellar, a direct forensic link between the suitcase and the victim's body. And here's the most notable part. Semen stains found on the duvet were later matched by DNA to John Andrew Ramsey, John Ramsey's adult son from his first marriage, a college student at the time who didn't live in the house. 10 details. None of them, on their own, is a verdict. Each has a competing explanation, and to this day, no court has ever charged Burke Ramsey in connection with his sister's death. The question, in the end, isn't who we believe. It's what the record actually says, and whether we're reading it fairly. If this video helped you understand the case better, like it, subscribe to Tell Index so you don't miss the next investigation, and share it with someone who'd want to dig into this too.